Hey guys, I hope you are all doing absolutely fantastically. I just wanted to make a very quick video explaining my thoughts about Brexit. So, towards the end of last week, the UK has voted to leave the European Union. This is a huge decision. It's going to have a massive impact on society. All in all, my opinion is that it was a pretty bad decision, and I think the consequences are going to be very detrimental for the EU, for the UK, and obviously us as members of society. The first thing I want to say about the referendum is that it was not a referendum about our membership of the European Union. It was essentially turned into something a lot more malicious. It was a referendum made about migrants, what we constitute British to be, and I think those questions really led to a darker side of the United Kingdom being shown. And I have a lot of faith in this country. I've been able to see the best of this country. The education I've received and the experiences I've had over the last 21 years of my life, having been born here, have been absolutely amazing. But having seen some of the rhetoric thrown around by our politicians, having seen the reasons given by so many members of the public as to why they voted leave from the European Union, it is truly distressing that perhaps my rose-coloured image of the outward-looking, welcoming, diverse United Kingdom may not be as accurate as I thought it was prior to Thursday. The second thing I want to highlight is a very big generational gap that was evident in the vote. So obviously 75% of 25 and under voted to remain in the European Union. That's not surprising. Young people tend to be slightly more liberal, and that was seen as the liberal position. But what I find really distressing is two things. The first of which is the slight hypocrisy of older generations, the over 50s and over 60s especially, who were able to reap the benefits of the European Union throughout their whole lives, with friendships formed, with places to work, with travel opportunities that they were afforded because of the European Union, and now they have deemed that our generation should not have the same opportunities, and I think that's fundamentally wrong, because I think our generation would benefit from a lot of those opportunities as well. The second thing to say is this generation has been hit by hardships not seen by a previous generation in a long time, whether it was the tripling of tuition fees or house prices so untenable that it's impossible to get on the housing ladder at your first attempt, and now leaving the European Union, which actively impacts our job opportunities and growth opportunities as human beings going forward. Third thing I want to say is that the European Union, for all its flaws, and I had a chance to work there, so I am aware of some of its inefficiencies. I'm aware that it doesn't run as smoothly as it could, and I'm aware of some of the democratic deficit. All those are valid criticisms. But what we have to stress, what liberal-minded people have to stress, is that the European Union was it still exists. It may not seem like it, and it may stop existing sometime in the future because of Brexit, but it still exists. What we have to stress is that the European Union was one of the biggest steps that humankind has taken. I mean, if you look at Europe for centuries prior to the European Union, it was England versus France, England and France versus Germany and Italy. There were so many competing ideologies, there were so many competing nations, there was so much conflict, and that was the focus of continental relationships. It was alliances and ententes based on conflict. The European Union was a project based on the commonality of us, the mutual goals we may have, the mutual interests we may have, and it was a platform for us to share the best of our cultures and make sure that there was peace going forward. And to the largest extent, the European Union has achieved that political end. And do I think that we're going to slip back into having wars every other year? I don't think that's true. But I think for Britain, what I thought was a very open-minded, very internationalist, outward-looking nation to turn its back on a project with goals so unanimously good, in my opinion, about our commonality as humans, the fact that someone born in Hungary is not so different to someone born in rural Shropshire. I think that's a real shame. And I think Britain had such a key leading role to play in that supranational entity that it's a real shame that we've turned our back on it. the last thing I want to say is that this vote was about an anti-establishment gesture from disenfranchised people, and I get their frustration. But what I do not understand is how politicians with straight faces were able to manipulate such large swathes of the electorate and promise them a future that they have come onto the news just days after the vote and say that they will not be able to give them. The famous promise being about the NHS. £350 million a week was promised by the Leave campaign to the NHS, and now they've retracted that. Nigel Farage retracted that less than 12 hours after the votes were counted. And also this idea that large swathes of the working class population in the north of England, who overwhelmingly voted to leave, the fact that they think they're now going to be afforded job opportunities that weren't there before is just an absolute myth, and I do feel for them. That's the sad irony of the situation, is that the people who are going to suffer the most, as is normally the case with shocks to the economy, are the worst off in society. So those who voted for Brexit because they thought that the Polish man next door will not get the job that he was meant to have or she was meant to have, that false truth was sold to them. And a lot of people, as it seems, have come out onto the news and said that now, because these immigrants will disappear, my life will get better. That connection is not there. That connection was never there, and it's just a fear tactic used by politicians very maliciously to sell a false truth that has unfortunately led people into thinking that the days ahead are very rosy and bright for them, when in actual fact not much will change. Because I understand some of their anti-elitist arguments about this global elite sitting in Brussels making decisions for them. First of all, that wasn't true. We were always a sovereign nation here in Britain, will continue to be. But the idea that now there isn't an elite living in Westminster or sitting in Westminster that has a similar disconnect from swathes of the population, it's just very unfortunate. And I think the decision to leave the European Union was made on lies, to put it bluntly. And I think if the British people were given an accurate and full picture of what the European Union is and what we benefited weekly, monthly, daily from being part of it, the result would have been very different.